talk about this crazy hilt that Nick commissioned an install for me from. This is it's called the Clan of Two Saber. It is a no external buttons saber. Everything is either gesture controlled or there are some mini tactiles on the chassis in case you do need to do some functionality. But I also put a Bluetooth module on here so we can make that a little bit easier once everything's kind of cinched up. So let's jump down to the table. We'll talk about the chassis, the stand, some of the etch work, and then go over a few things with considerations for the hilt. And then we'll come back out and then we'll go over a few fonts and then show off some gestures because, again, it's almost an entirely gesture-controlled saber. And then we'll wrap it up. All right, here's the Clan of Two Saber from Starfall Sabers. That was a concept that Nick brought to me and asked me to install. And then after he shipped it to me, kind of filled out the rest of the idea. And so then he had me etch and do a custom stand and plaque. So I'm going to take the saber and the chassis off for a second and talk specifically about this display setup. So we'll come back to that here in a second. So this is the plaque that he had me etch. It says Clan of Two, both in Mandoa and a Orabesh style English, so that it's easily readable. And then it does sport the mud horn to kind of fall in line with both the etch on this side and then the mythosaur that matches the base of the stand on this side. Okay, so what I've done is I've designed a little slot here so that this can just tuck in depending on how you want to display the saber. So if you decide to display all of the components, then it starts to get a little crowded. So you can take this off if you choose to, set it off to the side. Just depends on what you want to do. Okay, so the uprights here are going to ship separate. So that was the kind of idea so that this wasn't too fragile in freight. So there are two sets of uprights here. These thicker ones have these little silver accent and you can orient them whichever way you like. But the way I designed it was for them to be on the outside. But there's some greebly work on here and then kind of hidden in this sort of Death Star panel detail, these two uprights tuck right in here. Now, this saber does have a unique internal. It goes from this thick diameter to a kind of a step down into this 1-inch section. So there are two different widths of, sorry, this is out of focus, two different widths. I did print some extras, both just in case there's something that happens with them, or if you decide you don't like the fact that there's two different ones, you can just match up the larger ones. These are pretty robust, but I just printed a couple extra off just in case they break in transit or something like that. But these will just press fit down in here. On the upper ones, the ones that hold the actual hilt, I recommend either putting some E6000 here or on the bottoms, and then just kind of however you want to orient them, and then just let them cure in place. Super glue works well too, but sometimes you can get that all over the place and mar up the finish. Up to you, but these two lower ones are a little bit tighter fit, so you probably don't need to glue them. And if you decide you're going to keep the hilt with the chassis in it at all times, so that we can sort of keep up with the plate, then you can decide to either put them in or not. So that's up to you. All right, so that's the stand. Again, this will ship separately. Disassembled. Plaque will be off in one side, and then stand and the pieces will be off in another. All right, let's move on. Anything I don't cover in this video, I have a printout here. And then because this is a kind of a no button saber and it's going to be mostly gesture controlled, I went ahead and printed this out. This is off the FET 263 library. So some controls here. And then at the end, there's a link to the website where you can, just read up a little bit more on how to do it. But I'm going to try to demonstrate as much as I can the functionality and gesture controls with a blade in. I say that it's a no button, but there's no buttons on the external part of this hilt, right? So this was the concept from Nick. He's like, hey, can I get away with, just having maybe some buttons on the chassis? So we did that here. We printed a totally greeblied out chassis, and then there are 2 tiny tactile buttons here on the sides. So it does sport Profi V2. The config is on the SD card. There's a kill switch, 18650 battery. This comes with it. And then we just pop that out real quick. Springside your negative. So do have a custom battery wrap here with the, if I can get this upright, Starfall Sabers logo. So yeah, this is an 18650 3000 milliamp. If you notice, the positive and negative terminals were also clearly indicated. But yeah, we've got some greebly work, some weathering pigments, a little bit of rub and buff, and then a marble crystal chamber with a resin printed, see if I can get this, sorry, again, I'm doing this mirrored. This is the first time I'm doing this. With a resin printed kind of crystal accent up top. There's a DIY 4 pixel LED underneath the marble. So you'll get a little bit more animation than you would with the single NeoPixel. And to make this even more easier to kind of control and customize, it also sports a Bluetooth module. So we've got CC Sabers emitter for the NeoPixel connection, and then 28 millimeter KR bass speaker. So this thing can get super loud and aggressive. So we've got the battery in, but we didn't hear a boot sound. So if we just hit the kill switch, so we do have crystal animation. Now, on all of the presets, the emitter and crystal will match colors, because the idea behind putting the crystal chamber in here was to have something where if you decided to use the button controls to kind of change your blade color to something custom, you'd have something to see. Now that was before I went ahead and decided to make this fully removable. So, and then if you're seeing some blue lights, that is our, see if I can get this to show. We do have gesture controls because this is going to be a mostly gesture controlled saber. So you can sort of see, if I get this at the right angle, a blue and green blinking LED to show the status. And I'll demonstrate on a spare mobile phone. I'm actually recording this on my mobile phone, how to use the Bluetooth app, but we'll cover that here in a second. So yeah, this comes with the Starfall font package, 8 fonts, a battery level indicator that will be displayed in the crystal chamber if the chassis is out, from green to red. So green is good, yellowish is, it's getting low. You'll probably never get to red because you'll start to hear the speaker crackle before it gets too low. And then on the blade, it'll show a blue indicator light. Profi V2, the buttons on the side, if the saber is upright, this side of the saber is power, and then this side is aux. I don't know if I can show that on screen. So this side power, this side aux. So if we want to switch presets, we can just click the button. Celestial. You can see that on our hair. Let's actually just flip it this way. Okay. You can sort of see the animations happening in that crystal. Most of these are going to be like a slow pulse from a bright to a less bright color. Some of them will be a little bit more animated.
Hero's Journey.
Okay. And then if we wanted to ignite from here, we just press the power. Now, obviously, this does have gesture controls. So we have twist off, we have twist on, we have thrust on, which is a kind of parallel motion, and then we have swing on. Okay. So those are your gesture controls. Now, because this is a fully removable chassis, you're probably going to get some false starts when you're trying to put this back into the Saber. So just be mindful of that. Everything comes off from the pommel, and I obviously need to grease that so we're not squeaking. I will mention that the Saber can separate here, but I've cranked down really hard so that it's not easy to. And then the only external screw is this blade retention screw up top, okay? We do have an etch here. I think I showed this off just a second ago. So we got mythosaur on one side on the grip, and then the mudhorn on the other. And then up at the top, we have clan of 2. You can count the characters, basically. And then this is the way. So that's our Mando. So when we go to slide this in, I do want you to exercise some caution. As long as the chassis is off, as long as the chassis isn't on, meaning the blade's off, then you'll notice this diameter change. So what we don't want to happen is to ground out these pogo pins. So just be very mindful when you align this up to put in the Saber. One, that the chassis is off and that you're not touching anything. And then you just slide this fully in, and then you'll use the pommel to get it the rest of the way. Okay. Then everything's fully tight, nothing's loose, and then there's your emitter. Right? All right. So I'm going to try to go over a lot more of the controls with the blade in, because it's not that easy to do here on the ground, and it'll get a little confusing. But with no buttons on the outside, everything will be gesture controlled. So turning it on, engaging lockups and clashes, and then I've done what's called force push, which is, it takes a little bit to master. And again, I'll demonstrate that here in a second. Let me pause this part of the video, make sure my spare phone, because again, I'm recording this on my cell phone, is charged so we can demonstrate the Force Sync app and Bluetooth connectivity. Okay, so here's my old iPhone 7, and just to kind of show, hopefully this ring light doesn't get in the way, you're gonna wanna download the Force Sync app, and I should have links in either an email to Nick, or you can just look it up in the store. I think this is available on iOS or Android, so we'll wanna start that up. Obviously, the best thing to do when you're first doing this is to have the chassis out first, because we want the antenna to have, so right off the bat, you'll notice the BT909 is available to connect, okay? And you don't need a password to pair, so you just say pair. All right, so now we're on the home screen, and you'll want to, because this is Profi, switch over to the Profi, okay? All right, so now you can see the battery is fully charged, right? And then most of what you're going to want to do is remote control. So you can turn the Saber on. Get this out of the way. Let's see if I can do this down here. Oh yeah, that's much better. So we can clash, lock up, we can do our blast. So the one downside with gesture controls is there's no way to get blasters other than with the Force Sync app, okay? So all of the rest of these things, though, you can, we got our force, you can do with a gesture, okay? So if we want to switch presets, we just do that little guy, and then I will mention that Ruin is the only sound font with the Preon. So what I did for the defines, just in case you decide to upload your own fonts in the future, is the gesture controls normally will bypass Preons, but I've included the define for every gesture control will never bypass a pre-on. Just that way, when we're operating a saber, if a font has a pre-on, like a really cool sound or an animation like that one did, the emitter lights up. And I'll demonstrate this with the blade in. I just wanted to make sure that that was still functional with a gesture. So yeah, so we've got all that control right here. You can see our crystals lighting up. Generally speaking, once you've connected, now you can put this in the saber. Oops, there we go. I mentioned that might be an issue. So just be very mindful of when you're putting it in. So now that we've got our Bluetooth paired, we'll remember. And then once we have, like a blade in, we can just use the force sync app. So yeah, so that was the idea behind putting the Bluetooth in here, was that, if there are certain aspects of the functionality that you don't have with gesture controls, or you just say you want to kind of, choreograph a fight, you can have somebody off to the side with their phone or whatever device and then connect, and then you can sort of wield away. We'll end that here, and then we'll put a blade in, and I'm going to show most of the gesture controls and blade styles here after this. A couple quick things to recap on. I missed mention these. The Profi sits in a tray, and in order to reprogram it, if you need to, you can get a 90-degree cable. If you needed to pull the SD card for any reason, I would recommend tweezers. Now, because this is a silk PLA that I printed this in, the Profi was like a little bit slicker, so I've got it temporarily glued in with a little E6000. But if you need to flip it up for any reason, you can just get a little bit of tweezers or something to pry it up, and that glue will come out. It's a very light coat, but I didn't want it bumping out inside the hilt. So yeah, there's no reason you need to flip it up, just other than the fact that you don't have the right cable. But I highly recommend, just if you don't already have one, buying a 90-degree cable, and you can get those from any of the vendors. All right, so now you've seen the chassis, you've seen the buttons, you've seen the fact that there's nothing going on with this part of the hilt. Let's talk about gesture controls. Now, I generally don't try to go too much into detail, but because this is a unique saber, and I've done some extra defines to make this a little bit better of an experience without buttons, I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate that. So you saw down below, we have gesture on and off, and the on is either twist, thrust, or swing. So let's do that real quick. Twist on. Now we only have twist off. So the only way to turn it off would be to twist it off or to use the Bluetooth. And I did show that down below with the force sync app. And I'll probably bring my phone back out so we can switch between fonts. Now, swing, just real quick swing. And what's probably going to happen is you'll experience that one. If you're putting the chassis in, you'll probably accidentally cause it to swing. And then thrust, which again is like a horizontal motion, either back or forth, depends on what you do. So now you're on, okay? So you can swing away. Now, what I did unique with this is I did battle mode clash detection. So if we lightly tap it, we're gonna get clashes. It's kind of so light taps, you'll get clashes. Now, most of the time when I use battle mode, it's any clash, you start a lockup until you pull away. But I wanted to get at least a few instances where you could tap. It's a very minute set of. There we go. Okay, so that's the idea. Is you'll get a few clashes, but most of the time you'll engage a lockup. Now, a lockup is also tip effects. So if we have the saber on and we clash when we're in the horizontal position, we'll engage melts. And then if we're in the inverted position and we clash the saber, the lockup will be a drag. So let's demonstrate that real quick. All right, so any regular hard clash will start a lockup. But I don't know how well that's showing up on screen. That was our melt. Let me switch fonts. That one is a particular font that has a lot of quotes. Okay, let's try to demonstrate this a little bit better. So now we're on Hero's Journey. Let's see if we can do a little bit more. All right, but tiny taps. There we go. Will be clashes, but a sideward will engage melt. And if we rotate, we'll change the color of the melt. And the longer we hold it, the more animated it gets until you pull away. But if we're facing down, we're gonna get a drag effect. Okay. So that's lockups. Now, again, I mentioned that the only way to get blasters is with the app. That's the one downside to this. But with battle mode, you can do all those things, which is quite a bit. So the only other option is force. Now this is the one that's going to take a while to master because the hilt has to be perfectly perpendicular as you move forward. So it's going to take me a little while. But when it happens, I've got this unstable feature. So you'll hear the sound. Again, some fonts will be quotes with a force effect, but this one I think has mostly sound effects. And then when I actually perform the force, you'll see an unstable blade. So let's see if I can do this. But you're basically just gonna push. It's called a force push. And there we go. And you can sort of see it. So what happens is I keep tilting the saber as I'm pushing forward because I'm trying to avoid my ceiling fan. But yeah, this is the one that's going to take the most practice. So you'll see it on the printout, the orientation that you're supposed to use, and then it's going to just take it's going to take a lot to master. And so because I'm actually hitting light, I'm actually causing the chassis to vibrate. We're actually seeing those lighter clashes. Except now I did it too much and I'm in a lockup. There we go. Got it that time. There we go. I'm getting it better. It takes so much patience because again, if you get wobbly with it, it's basically like you're just the board can't tell if you're swinging it around. And there it is again. All right. There we go. But again, the force effect, I can do this up against the wall. Here, I'll do it up against my shirt. Looks like this when it's... So you'll see it better in person, but that's going to be what the force effect looks like. And you'll also get that sound. So this font is the one that has the prion. So I'm going to show you that real quick with the gesture control. So again, the idea was if you add any fonts in the future and you need a prion, like they have prions in either their blade style or whatever, then you'll have that ability with the gesture control.
Reconcile.
So there's some light touches. And then okay, so what's going on now is that because I've engaged the force sync, it kind of took it out of battle mode. So now I'm not engaging lockups anymore. So just understand that the Force Sync app will kind of override the config if you engage it enough. But I think the moment you reset, now I'm back in battle mode. So just know that if you're dealing with the remote control app while the Saber's on, you could bump out of battle mode after you're done using it. So the best thing to do is turn the blade off, turn the blade back on. Now you're back in battle mode. So we can get our lockups, melts, and all that stuff. There it is. It's a real hard gesture to master. I'm getting better at it though. A couple other quick things to mention since I hadn't demonstrated it yet. This is a 7/8 blade. The Profi is programmed for a 32-inch length. So if you decide to use a different blade, you'll need to reprogram it, and you can do that a number of ways, which you can read about on the printout. But I'm going to use the app here to switch between presets. When we get to the last and final preset, we get our battery indicator.
Battery level.
So this will, at a 32-inch length, the further out this is, the more charge there is. Now, obviously, if you're using the remote, you got a real-time indicator of your battery charge. Do keep in mind, if you're watching that while you're swinging the Saber around, you're getting real-time current draw. So literally just a second ago, I had the blade on and it said the battery was at 63%, and now it's at 93%. So if I go back to and obviously the color of the blade will draw more current or not, depending on which one it is. So whites are brighter. It's engaging all of the LEDs more than it would if it's just a solid blue or a solid red. So here, I'm going to light this up. And now I have a 62% battery indicator. 59. But I turned it off. Now I'm at 92. So we'll show that here again.
Battery level.
Okay, so to play the track, you either want to hold the power button on the chassis, or I don't know if I showed this up close with the Force Sync app, but the little play icon will be right there. So let's go back to so if you wanted to, you could do this on the chassis without engaging Bluetooth, then put it in the Saber, and then light it up, okay? And then we can just hit stop. Otherwise, you'll have to do that with the chassis out. So yeah, hopefully that goes over most of the functionality of this, and I really hope whoever gets this has fun wielding it around. I tried to program it so that the experience is a lot funner than it would be if you can't do anything. So yeah. All right, thank you.